What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Texas Tech coming off a pretty sneaky and quiet 8-4, 8-5 type season in 2024. So yeah, Texas Tech coming off a pretty sneaky good year last year in 2024. Not a lot of people were talking about this team. You know, they were talking about Baylor, and of course Texas Tech ended up being a surprise team as well in 2024. My thoughts on this team heading into 2025, you know, I talked about Texas Tech being the most underrated team heading into 2025. I think this team is actually going to be pretty good. You look at the roster, I know it's not talented, but there's a lot of production coming back. You got Bereem Morton back at quarterback, coming off a pretty decent year last year. I think he has a chance to be a pretty good quarterback in 2025 in the conference. I mean, offensively, really the only concern that I have for this team is maybe the offensive line, but they added a bunch of additions in the transfer portal. I like the way this team added, you know, those additions in the transfer portal. Yeah, they added a lot on both sides of the football, so that's really the difference about this Texas Tech team, and that's why I think they could become one of those dark horse teams in the Big 12 this year in 2025, and their schedule really sets up pretty well. Here is that schedule for Texas Tech. Again, they were 8-5 last year in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this Texas Tech team in 2025. They're going to start things off with University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's an FCS team there, and then they also got Kent State, one of the worst teams in the country last year at the FBS level. So I think Texas Tech gets off to a pretty easy 2-0 start. I think they beat both of these teams, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff and Kent State. They should be able to score a bunch of points in those games. So I got the Red Raiders starting off 2-0, and then after that they play Oregon State at home on September 13th. You know, of course, a former Power 5 team. They're in like the former Pac-12 or Pac-2, whatever you want to call it, and they weren't really that great last year. I think the difference though for these two games against University of Arkansas Pine Bluff and Kent State, and then also Oregon State, I think this game will be a little bit tougher, but you know, it's a game that Texas Tech definitely should be the better team, and they should be able to win this one. I'm going to say they win it by at least a couple of touchdowns, so I think about like 14 points, somewhere in that point range. So I think Texas Tech starts off 3-0, going into conference play the final way here from September 20th all the way to the end of the season at November 29th. They open up Big 12 play on the road at Utah on September 20th. Utah is a team that is trying to turn things around after a disappointing year. I mean, this is out west, so I mean, it's really going to be a tough place to play. Utah, though, I mean, they lost, pretty good production on the defensive side of the football. I mean, offensively, they're going to have maybe some concerns at the quarterback position. That's probably the only concern that I have for this Utah team, but they're a well-coached team, just like Texas Tech is. This is a very consistent program in the Big 12, even though they did not show that last year. It was just a pretty up-and-down season for Utah and a very disappointing year, and I've kind of been back and forth on this game. I've kind of been having, a pretty tough time with this one. I was kind of hesitant to pick Texas Tech to win this game just because it's on the road, and I feel like they're the better team. But I think, just because it's out west, and also I think Utah definitely can have a bounce back year. I don't know if they'll become a contender in the Big 12, but, this game is on the road, so that's a very tough place to play. It's also the first road game of the season for Texas Tech after those 3 home games in a row against non-conference opponents. So I think Texas Tech is going to fall short in this one. I think it's one of those low-scoring defensive battles. I think it will be competitive. I think Utah does get the win here, so I'm going to say Texas Tech does lose that game just because it's out west and everything, so they do have to travel and everything, so I got Texas Tech losing their first game of the season. That's going to drop them to 3-1, and then they get a bye week before playing at Houston on October the 4th, so they got back-to-back road games here. Houston is another team that I feel like is going to bounce back in 2025. Willie Fritz in his second year as the head coach, but I think here's what's going to happen. I think Texas Tech is going to split here between Utah and Houston. They're going to split these 2 road games here on September the 20th and October the 4th. So I think Texas Tech is going to lose to Utah, but then they beat Houston, and they also get a bye week here, so I kind of expect the Red Raiders to bounce back. I don't think they're the better team compared to Houston, Houston. But I just feel like with all these transfers, especially after a bye week, they kind of get used to each other, and that's where they start to pick up the tempo. So I think Texas Tech does get a big win here at Houston on October the 4th, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Cougars did pull off some sort of upset in this game. But I got Texas Tech getting the win. That's going to put them at 4-1. And then they play at home against Kansas on October the 11th. I'm kind of expecting the Jayhawks to bounce back this year in 2025, but you never know. They could be up and down in 2025 again. They're coming off a pretty disappointing year last year, but they had a first-year offensive coordinator, so I think that offensive coordinator can do a better job this year for them. But Texas Tech, though, playing at home, I kind of expect them to be the better team here. I think this game is kind of close for a little while, but then Texas Tech probably does pull away, and I think the Red Raiders get the win here. So I'm going to go with Texas Tech to get the win. So back-to-back wins there for the Red Raiders against Houston and Kansas, and that's going to put them at 5-1. Then they play at Arizona State on October the 18th. I think this is going to be a competitive game. I think it's one of those games that it's going to be really just exciting to watch. Arizona State has a lot of production coming back. Both of these teams I think are actually pretty even in my opinion. But I look at the Sun Devils. I just think they're a little bit of a better team on paper. I like their roster, and of course, they're well coached by Kenny Dillingham. Coming off that Big 12 championship, of course, last year. And plus, it's on the road. This is a very tough place to play. I think Texas Tech will be competitive, but I don't think it's going to be enough here to pull off an upset. So I think Arizona State playing at home, they're going to get the win here. So that drops Texas Tech now to 5-2. And then they come back at home to play Oklahoma State on October 25th. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be really that great this year. I think they can have a chance to have a pretty good turnaround in 2025, but they're also a team pretty similar to Utah, coming off a pretty disappointing year last year. And I know Mike Gundy can really turn this program around, but I don't think it's going to be enough this year. I think Texas Tech is the better team, and I think the Red Raiders do win this one. I'm going to say by at least a couple of touchdowns. Again, I just don't know how good Oklahoma State is going to be, especially after a disappointing year last year in 2024. So I got Texas Tech improving to 6-2. And then they get to the month of November. They'll play at Kansas State on November 1st. Kansas State and Texas Tech, these are two really well-even teams in my opinion. These are two well-coached teams, so I think this is a pretty even matchup. Kansas State, I think, will be a pretty good team this year. They should be a contender in the Big 12 like they always are. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty even matchup. I did pick Kansas State to win this game already, though. So, yeah, the Wildcats, I don't think they're the better team, but just because they're playing at home, this is a 50-50 game. It's kind of a tough one for me to call, so I think home field advantage will be the difference, and I think Kansas State gets the win. So that's going to put Texas Tech now at 6-3 on the year, and then they come back at home to play a big game against BYU on November 8th. I did pick Texas Tech to win this game just because they're playing at home, but I think it's also one of those upset alert type games. I think BYU definitely has the more experienced roster, but when I did my BYU video, I did say that the Cougars of BYU need to slip up somewhere, and I did say this game just because Texas Tech, they're playing at home. It's a very tough place to play, and I think Texas Tech kind of overlooked Kansas State from last week, and they're probably looking ahead to this game against BYU the next week, and I think they'll come in fired up for this one. So I think the Red Raiders in a pretty competitive game, a pretty close game. It could go really two different ways. It could be a shootout, or it could be a low-scoring defensive battle, but I'm going to say that Texas Tech does pull off the upset here. They get a huge win against BYU. That might be the biggest win here on this schedule that they have in 2025 is against BYU for 2025. So I got the Red Raiders now improving to 7-3, and then they play UCF at home on November 15th. UCF, of course, Scott Frost returning, for the Knights this year. I think it's going to take some time for this UCF program to get back to where they used to be. Although Texas Tech, maybe they're kind of celebrating that BYU victory a little bit, and they probably start off slow in this game. Plus, this is in the month of November, and there's a lot of priority in the Big 12, but I think Texas Tech is the better team. They start off slow, but then they get things going, and I think the Red Raiders do win this game by at least a couple of touchdowns. So that's 2 wins in a row, and they are now 8-3 going into the final game of the season. They get a bye week before playing at West Virginia on November 29th. Of course, it's always a very tough place to play at West Virginia in Morgantown. A lot of people are kind of expecting West Virginia to just be a pretty average type team, I don't really disagree with that. I think they'll be a pretty average team. They can still make it to a bowl game, but still, it is on the road at West Virginia. Very tough place to play. But I think the bye week actually does help out Texas Tech. They get ready for another road game against West Virginia. It will be a tough test, but I think Texas Tech actually, if you look at the two rosters, I think they're actually a little bit better than West Virginia's roster. So I think the Red Raiders, they do come along, and they are coming off that little bit of momentum after the BYU win, and they're coming in on this one on a hot streak. So I think Texas Tech actually coming out of the bye week, they go on the road and they beat West Virginia in a pretty close game on November 29th. So I think Texas Tech closes out the year with 3 wins in a row from BYU all the way to West Virginia, and I got them closing out the year with a win against West Virginia here on November 29th. So I got the Red Raiders finishing 9-3 in 2025. So like I said, I'm pretty high on this Texas Tech team. I'm not saying they're going to win the Big 12 championship this year. I'm saying that they're definitely one of those 2 dark horse teams in this conference. The other one is Baylor, obviously. These 2 teams have a lot of production coming back. They can be like 2 top 25 teams this year. And also Texas Tech, I think, has the pretty easiest schedule in all of college football this year. Again, 3 easy non-conference games. Yes, they do play Arizona State, Kansas State, and BYU, but I feel like they're going to at least win one of those games there, those big games here on the schedule in 2025. And yeah, I could see Texas Tech doing a little bit, I could see this team probably officially going 8-4, but I got this team going 9-3. If they go 7-5, I feel like that will not be a disappointment either, but I got this team finishing 9-3, so that's what I'm going to go with here for Texas Tech. And I said I think this is the most underrated team heading into 2025, and definitely in this conference for 2025 as well. So that's my prediction for Texas Tech for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And give me your prediction for the Red Raiders down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.